as chair today. Brittany Quick-Warner is out of the country on business, and I believe that Chris McAllister is going to be online with us, the other vice chair. So I will be chairing the meeting. Feel free to throw things at me. It's happened before, so I do expect it. So let's do a quick around the table member check-in. First off, let's look down the agenda. Kate, is there anything extraordinary on the agenda or any adjustments that need to be made to this?
Not at this time, Chair.
Okay, great. So it's a fairly straightforward, cut and dried agenda. So we'll go around the table with introductions, and then I'll ask for a quick introduction from the folks in the audience so everybody knows everybody. We don't always meet in face-to-face, but I'll tell you all why we're here in Harris Hall, of all places, because this Harris Hall is equipped for Metro TV. They are actually up there. Those of you who used to meet here know that they're there. And when the Poverty and Homelessness Board, the year after it came into existence, we determined that this board should be televised live. And it is televised live, both the general meetings such as this one and the executive committee meetings, which are in the alternate months, is televised live, and it will be repeated on Metro TV. So that's why we're here, and that's why there's we're kind of stuck to a few places that we can actually hold these meetings because of that. So I'll go around the table, starting with to my left with Councillor Fleck.
So Mike Fleck, City of Cottage Grove City Councilor. I'm the rural representative on the PHP.
I'm Maggie Bagan from Florence, and my permanent membership is pending, but I represent several committees on homelessness with the City of Florence.
Thank you, Maggie.
Are these mics actually, they are, okay. They're live, I don't have to do anything.
And thank you for the reminder, Mayor. Neil told me to ask everybody to notice where the mics are, and if you are a little bit distant from one, pull it toward you for good sound. So thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up.
Thank you. Lucy Venice, Mayor of Eugene.
Cliff Harold, Lane County Sheriff, and I think I serve as the at-large elected official position on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And also, just to let you know, I'll have to take a little bit of an early leave for a meeting at 1.
Yeah, please.
Diana Aldridge, Lane County HSD support staff.
Dave Haverland with the United States Department of Veterans Affairs.
Sheila Wegner with the Oregon Department of Human Services.
Hi, I'm Cindy Perry with Lane Workforce Partnership.
Matthias Smith, Youth Representative.
Kate Budd, Interim Human Services Division Manager.
And I'm Pat Farr with the Board of County Commissioners. And Kate, do we know who's online on TV, online right now? Maybe Carly, you can help us with that. Here we go. So I'll ask for members online to, I'll start at the top. Donna Butera.
Hi, I'm Donna Butera, the McKinney-Vento Liaison for Bethel School District.
And Dr. Foster.
Dr. Willie Foster, I'm the healthcare representative.
And Julie Lambert.
No, she's not a member.
Oh, Julie's not a member. Anna, could you help me with the membership?
Well, hi, I'm Julie Lambert, and I work, I'm the chair for the Lived Experience Advisory Group for Unhoused Engagement. Thank you.
And next maybe Terry Shea. Terry, can you hear me? All right.
Catherine Ryan.
And then looking down, Catherine Ryan.
Everyone, Catherine Ryan, she, her with the Pacific Source CCO.
That's all right.
My apologies for not being clearer. Kate, is there any, should I go down the entire list of people online? That's a long list. Are there any other members online that I've not mentioned? Any either ex officio or voting members of the board?
It's like Joseph Beal.
Joseph Beal, thank you.
Yep. Hey, Pat, Jacob Fox is on. Homes for Good.
Hi, Jacob.
Sean Murphy.
And Sean Murphy and Jacob Beal. Sean, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, hi, Pat, Sean Murphy is on.
Very good. Then
Foster Martinez from St. Vincent de Paul present.
Foster.
Very good. Then I'll look into the audience. We have a small audience with us, so if we could start, just each audience member, please introduce.
Farr, Debbie Farr with Trillium CCO is here.
You're always butting in.
Only you can say that.
No, say that again online, please.
Sorry, Debbie Farr with Trillium Community Health Plan CCO is here. I'm joining by phone because I'm going to be in transit to another meeting.
Thank you.
I apologize for not being.
Thank you. For the fourth time. Beautiful, thank you.
Dan Bryant, Square One Villages.
And Kate, did you say hi?
I did.
Okay, good. Then let's go to business then. The agenda review, we'll just go down the agenda in order today. I don't see anything that's going to stall us and force us to move things around a little bit. But I understand, Kate, that Plaza de Nuestra Comunidad, the new coalition of agencies, were going to be here today, but they're not. Can you describe that a little bit?
Sure. I just wanted to take the opportunity to celebrate a coming together here locally in the community between Centro Latino Americano, Puerto de la Familia, and Downtown Languages. I had the pleasure of going to their gala a little over a week ago, and I know the mayor was there as well. And they announced that they have a new name, and it was an enormously celebratory event, and they encouraged us to share this exciting news with others. So their new name is Plaza de Nuestra Comunidad, and they are working on putting up new websites and new information to share with the community. And so just our great offering of excitement and celebration for this new agency and collaboration.
Thank you, Kate. I'm looking forward to hearing from them in person, perhaps 2 months from now, at the next regular full meeting. Very good. Any questions or comments on that? Mayor, you were there. What did you see?
I just have to say that this is a huge lift to take 3 independent nonprofits and bring them together and combine their budgets and their missions and their staff. And there was such excitement, and I think it's so promising that they'll be so strong together. It was really thrilling to be part of that celebration.
And online, is there a comment online? No. Well, thank you, Mayor. Then hopefully we can get them on the agenda for two months from now. So we'll move down to public comment. Has anyone signed up, or does anyone wish to provide public comment today? I see none. Okay, see none. Then we'll move to a follow-up on the previous meeting and with a consent calendar. Now, what do we need to do to follow up from the previous meeting, Kate? Is there anything in particular that is simmering there?
There isn't, just simply approving the minutes.
Then we have before us then is a consent calendar, which is the minutes from April 20th and the May 23rd statement financial dashboard and financials. So that is a consent calendar which we can pass with a single motion unless somebody wishes to pull either of those 2 items from the consent calendar. I see no desire to pull anything, so I'll ask for a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Vinnis and seconded by Councillor Fleck. The consent calendar. Any discussion to the motion? No, I don't think that's discussion to the motion. Thank you very much. And if you're online and your mic is hot, could you silence it to avoid any whisperings of background, unless you wanted us to hear everything that's going on in the room. Thank you. So we have the motion. No further discussion of the motion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Passes with the unanimous consent of all present, all voting members present. And I'm trusting, Diana, that you'll be able to sift which members that is.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Then Next on the agenda is the HMIS policies and procedures, and I think, Carly, you have a little bit of a presentation for us.
Can you hear me okay? Great. There's an item in the packet about this, and it's very long, but I'll scroll to where that is. We included, I think, the whole section of policies and procedures for HMIS in this document. And of course, I don't know which page it's on, so you're going to watch me scroll for a minute. These are red lines, so I'm just going to outline the changes for you really quickly and just wanted to put this for a vote. One is we updated our contact information so that the right person can be called. It's important. And then we did two pretty minor changes. One is that we included a section, I think this will be helpful for just all involved to understand how we calculate inventory and why we do it that way. And this is related to my presentation later, so you got a little bit of a preview. Like I said, it's many pages in.
How many?
Thank you. Yeah, we're almost there. But we included a section that talks about how sorry, I didn't know which page it was on, but how the inventory is calculated and why. And I'm just going to be frank, we don't really have a lot of agency in this area. HUD defines it, but we felt like it was important to let folks know why and sort of outline how different types of shelter or project types, how that inventory is documented and why that is. And so this is my first year doing our housing inventory count submission to HUD. And in that process, we submitted some things. They said, hey, this doesn't look quite right. And over the process, really learned what it is that they're looking for and the best way to do this. And so sort of documented this is how, going forward, those changes are, and just want to be transparent about what that is. So for emergency and alternative shelter, inventory is the number of beds they have. It's pretty straightforward. Look around at that place and how many beds, how many units do you have as well. For some of these other programs, for things like continuum of care, PSH, we really wanted to reflect what we've applied to HUD for. We want that inventory to match our COC application. For other PSH, it's the number of vouchers that they have at that time. Those aren't facility-based, and so the vouchers really will fluctuate depending on the program and funding that's available. And for rapid rehousing, this was news to me, but when we did the submission, HUD really wants to know just the night of the count, how many people do you have housed in rapid rehousing, and that's your inventory. So we always have 100% inventory. That's the way they want it. And so that was learning for me. And then transitional housing, similar to alternative shelter. An emergency shelter is just how many beds do you have available, and that's your inventory. So this is how we calculate that, and just wanted to make that clear. There's one other item, and fortunately it's on the same page, but we wanted to update our data timeliness standards. This is something that we need to do because Oregon Housing and Community Services is updating their program plans for us. So beginning July 1st, all programs that they fund need to have information entered within 48 hours of the event happening. Our policy used to say 24. So we're actually extending the time where we can. For shelter projects, we want to keep it at that 24 hours because that accuracy and inventory and timeliness is so important, but wanted to be able to free up some time where we can, knowing that because of this change coming in July, we can't go any further than 48 hours. So that's the fullest extent we really could offer there. And that's the full list of changes that we're making at this time.
Excellent. That's a lot of information in a short presentation. We allowed 5 minutes, but there may be questions around the room. Any questions on Carly's presentation? I'll begin with Councillor Fleck, followed by Mayor Vinus.
So just a comment. For those of you who don't know, I also represent an agency that's using HMIS. And I will tell you, timeliness is always a challenge for a small rural agency. We serve 5,000 individuals a year for food boxes primarily. Our other programs aren't necessarily a problem, but 70 or 48 hours is sometimes very challenging with short staff. We have, two, sometimes one person at the front counter, and getting all those projects, those services in that time is a little challenging. So I'm glad we're staying at 48 hours, because 24 would be nearly impossible for us. But it was 72 for a very long time, just for reference. So, I support this, just knowing that once in a while, we're not going to achieve it.
Mayor Venus.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through this. I'm remembering that when we had the executive committee meeting, we talked about the 2-week interval for people to claim their housing. Is that included in this document, or is that something else?
That's a distinct policy, so that would be the coordinated entry.
That was the coordinate, so it's not part of this?
No.
Okay, I'll come back to that when that.
We work together a lot.
Right.
We are different in this case.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Carly? Okay.
I did see another comment online.
Yeah, I am the chat person, and I'm down here.
Okay.
Heather shared that 24 to 48 hours is really hard. 72 would be more manageable. I totally hear that, and the vast majority of our projects are OHCS funded in some form and fashion. So really, that's the furthest we could go. And then Donna had her hand raised as well.
Hi, Donna, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry if this is a silly question, but could you please explain again how the rapid rehousing vouchers always come in at 100%? I didn't quite catch that.
Yes, and this is helpful because it frees me up some time in a few minutes on my other agenda item. The way rapid rehousing works is essentially like a program has a budget. We have $100,000 to spend on rent assistance, or we have this amount. And as we know, rent prices are changing and fluctuating, and you don't know if you're going to be working with a household of 2 or a household of 6, and those rent prices are going to be very different. And so in a PSH project, especially for something like Commons on MLK, we have 51 units, and they have beds in them. And each one has this many beds, so this is how many beds we have. Rapid rehousing, where we're really looking for units in the community and what's the best fit for this individual or for this family, that's going to change so much. It's really challenging to say at the beginning of the year, we're going to serve 20 families. Well, we have no idea what their needs are going to be, what their rent is going to cost, what their arrearages are. It really can fluctuate and change. And so the guidance we have gotten from HUD is that inventory should be the number of households you're serving, not just with some sort of housing navigation service, but with rent assistance on that evening. So the night that we document this inventory each year happens the same night as the PIT count. We calculate how many households are getting rent assistance on this night. That becomes essentially the number of units. So how many apartments are we paying for? And then the number of beds is essentially the number of clients. So it's a little bit challenging because it doesn't quite fit the model of a person in a building that we control. People are much more complicated than that. And that's sort of the best workflow that HUD has been able to come up with. So rapid rehousing, we might have a goal of serving 20 families. Maybe we actually had funding to serve 22, or maybe we were only able to serve 17 as rent increased over the year. And so this inventory is going to reflect who we were actually able to serve with the money rather than our estimate and hope at the beginning of the year.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Donna. Any further questions? Then I have one regarding the 48 hours versus the desired 72 hours. The 48 hours, that is a requirement of OHCS?
Yes, it goes into effect on July 1st.
And do we know why?
Yes, HUD's strong recommendation and best practice is to put the information in directly. So their guidance and best practice is 0 hours for timeliness. You see the person, you're talking to them, you put it into the computer right then. That works great for some programs, and like Mike shared, it does not work for others. And so I think OHCS is trying to move us closer to that best practice of 0 hours or 24, and this is one of the ways in which they're doing that, is just sort of making their program standards align with what the federal best practice is. That being said, I don't know for sure. It was in the manual, and so we looked ahead and said, oh no, we need to plan for this and make accounting for it. Okay, then I'm going to follow that a little bit because the
edicts rained down on us that make our work more difficult to achieve, particularly once you get to community sharing in Cottage Grove, which is even further remote. You know, it seems that sometimes people sitting at a desk don't always understand what actually happens on the ground. And now maybe that's not the case here, but really, what's the penalty? Let's say Mike can't do it in 48 hours. What happens then?
We don't like penalties.
We don't.
I'm going to be quite honest. Really, the way we have many of our reports, and I know Mike has seen these, but other people are just kind of picturing this. We say to agencies, here's how you're doing compared to our standards. So here's our standard for completeness. Our goal is 97% of questions are asked and filled out for everybody. Here's how you're doing compared to that metric. Another one is, here's how you're doing on data timeliness. Are most of your records done during that time or not? Mm-hmm. And in some ways, this is a helpful way for us to kind of measure whether the information is good. If Mike's doing things within 3 days versus 2, it's probably not that different. But if you're taking 3 weeks or 3 months to put something in, did we really remember what happened? And so that's the challenge. Like, we have to pick a date. Like Mike said, it was 72 hours for quite a long time. Actually, for the last year or two, it was 24. And that was not doable. So we wanted to extend, but the reason we couldn't go back to the previous requirement is this state piece.
Okay. I still have more questions on that,
Yeah,
but Mike has one that's probably more pertinent than mine.
And just, this comes down to staffing. I mean, obviously, there are agencies that can do direct entry. So somebody comes in, they're right on the computer doing direct entry. They're instantly putting that into the database. For a little agency like ours, we still use files. And so when we're overloaded, let's say we have 120 people come in a day, we are not able to do that at that time. And so those get into a box that's dated, and then our folks will, after we close or before we open the next day, work on that. And the problem just comes down to when, you have heavy volume periods, especially July, when everybody has exited from the program June 30, and everybody coming in has a new entry exit, which takes a lot longer than just adding a service. And so there's most of the time, I will say, I think we hit the target. It becomes a challenge when you have, especially in July, when you have all the folks being entered in again. It's just a little challenging. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up the time of the committee.
No, this is really spot on the issue, because we are so strapped for resources at every single level. And once you get down to rural agencies like community sharing, there are no resources. There's no the flexibility is the salaried individual. That's the only flexibility in the system. And so it's simply, we find it's impossible in some cases to come even close to meeting the deadlines that are put down upon us. And while, Carly, you're talking about our flexibility and, our saying, no, we understand. Do people understand, the people who we report to, do they understand? And that's more than a rhetorical question, do they?
Yeah. And that's something we get asked about is, let's look at the timeliness of the records. That's something I send to OHCS. But I think Mike is spot on when he calls it a target. This is the goal. Of course, it's not always going to happen, and we'd rather have something in late than not have it at all. This is the target and the standard that we hold, knowing that it's not always going to be possible.
Yeah. And all rules are there for a reason, and for a good reason, we hope. However, in my experience, our hope is not always founded, and sometimes the rules are just there because somebody arbitrarily placed that in there. And if there isn't a good reason, then we need to challenge that and make certain that the community sharing and I'm just using our agency as a flagship here, are able to do their job. Because, if you look, let's not get into the details of this, but if you look at the payroll issues that we have in our rural agencies right now, and the cost of housing and all of the things that are making it almost impossible for them to not dip into reserves just to operate on a daily basis, and then to place what sometimes feel like onerous requirements on them. Certainly not onerous to somebody sitting in Washington, D.C., but onerous to somebody on, 2nd and Main. Is there a 2nd and Main in Cottage Grove? I don't know. So anyway, that's enough on that. But something that I think we can register, that we don't always have to blindly adhere to what it is that the edicts that are placed upon us. While we do have to comply, we can try to rattle and make certain that things do work for the people who are actually trying to, spend the few dollars that they have to get the job done. All right. Well, that lasted longer than 5 minutes, Carly, but thank you very much. Any further questions or comments?
And I if I may, I think, Carly's role, of course, is to make sure that we're aligned with what the state is asking us to do. And part of the role of this group is to advocate for the things that, we may not feel make sense. And so let's recognize, that this is of concern, and it could be an advocacy point for the next legislative session, because that often is how, the substantive changes are made. And to make sure that those 48 hours are in the policies and procedures is important, because those are things that the state is taking a look at on an annual basis to make sure that our policies and procedures align with what their expectations are. And one of the greatest challenges that we have in Lane County is that we don't have a lot of flexible funds where we're able to do what we need to do. And so we rely heavily on the state, and therefore, do need to meet their regulations in order to continue to receive dollars.
Well, thank you for that. We do have means to go up the channels, and we have associations, Mayor Binnis, that you and I are members of. We have the Association of Oregon Counties and the Oregon League of Oregon Cities. Thank you. That really do have a great deal of punching power with the legislature and with the agencies beyond the legislature. So we'll use that whenever we can. But thanks very much. It's just, let's run these flags up the flagpole and see how the breeze flaps them, and see if we can make some changes when changes are in order. So.
Got a hand up. Mayor Van Gordon has his hand up.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Yeah, and Pat, the only comment I guess I was going to make is we should be advocating for this. The thing that I think is the challenge for the elected officials around here is we've got to summarize this in a way that makes sense to have us have a conversation with other elected officials, right? So, if we can get some sort of summary of pain points, I'm more than happy to raise them, with any elected official conversation I have or at those statewide associations. But one of the things we don't really do a good job is sort of transitioning from this conversation to sort of pulling the conversation up and summarizing it in a way that we can actually hand it to elected officials and go, you want to do something that's going to help the situation, right? Deal with these sort of bottlenecks.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that, Mayor Van Gordon. I think one of the functions of the Poverty and Homelessness Board itself, because of the breadth of our makeup, is that we do have an opportunity to potentially push things forward in ways that Mayor Van Gordon just either lamented or commented. I'm not sure which that was, but not every county has a board like this, and not every jurisdiction has a board that really has broad membership. That really, there's a lot of above the weight punching it around this table, and I think we have an opportunity to use it. Very good.
A quick question.
Yes, please.
Is that 48 hours an administrative rule or statute?
It is a program manual, so OHCS publishes for each of its funding sources. Sometimes they're nice and combine them into one big packet for multiple, but the standards that go on top or sort of accompany the contracts for the programs that they administer. So I could list many acronyms for you, but all of those programs sort of have guidelines for how information has to be documented and what they want to see and what reports that I need to send to them. And timeliness is just one of those pieces that they are interested in and have some requirements around.
Thank you. The reason I ask is because sometimes the change you're looking for may not be legislative, and you mentioned that it's part of rule writers who are part of a different system. So thinking about who you'd want to ask to make that change may look different.
Absolutely. And we have a presence in the Association of Oregon Counties LGAC meeting, which Amber Bell attends that meeting on a regular basis. So we have a direct ear of OHCS on a monthly basis. So thank you very much. And in answer to the question, then, that one is more administrative. In fact, it's probably even less than administrative. It's somebody's desk that it came from. So very good. Councilor.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like we need to approve these. So with that, I'll move that we approve the changes to the HMIS policies and procedures.
Thank you for reeling us in. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Mike Fleck and seconded by Matthias Smith. Any discussion to the motion? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes with all.
Aye.
Now it passes with all present voters unanimous. And it looks like we do have we have a full, no, Chris McAllister and Brittany Quickborn are the only ones absent from, as far as I can tell. So then we'll move down the agenda to All in Lane County. And it's calling for me and Kate Budd to give an update on what's happening. Now, Kate's a little bit closer to the minute-to-minute happenings with All in Lane County. So could you give us just a brief description of what All in Lane County is, and then where are we?
Sure. So on January 10th, the governor declared an emergency due to homelessness. And that set in motion a series of actions that Lane County has moved forward, including creating a multi-agency coordinating group and also submitting a plan as to how we would move the governor's identified outcomes forward around preventing the number of households that are experiencing houselessness, creating new emergency shelter beds that meet the HUD definition of emergency shelter, which include providing heat, having electricity, and also access to restrooms and showers, and then rehousing folks from experiencing houselessness in uninhabitable areas and moving them into permanent housing. So we submitted the plan. From that, it was accepted, and then we received approximately $15.5 million as well as $2.5 million to move our plan forward. And so since then, Lane County has administered a request for proposal, which received 44 different action item requests, which was fantastic. And so we continue to be in that process to work with agencies to allocate funds. And so I'm not able to give any further information about that, but we'll send out the list once we can release it publicly. In the meantime, the MAC continues to meet to look at system changes. We're really focused right now on encampment-focused outreach, and James will talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We're also looking at how we can bring in additional partners and put additional supports in place in order to help populations that are most disproportionately affected by houselessness here in Lane County. And as a part of that plan, the populations that were identified as being disproportionately affected are people with disabilities, people who identify as Black, African American, or Indigenous and Alaskan Native, as well as folks who identify as genders other than male or female. And so, as you can imagine, we have many amazing culturally specific agencies in the community, as well as agencies that are culturally responsive. And so the MAC is looking at, what will be our definition of culturally responsive and culturally specific, and then how do we work to provide more supports to individuals who identify in those populations. So there's much work ahead of us, but we have also done quite a bit of work. And as soon as the contracts are in place between Lane County and the agencies, then the programs will start moving full-fledged ahead. As you may also recall, all the dollars do need to be spent by January 10th of 2024. And so we continue to have a short period of time in order to achieve our outcomes that we've agreed to with the state. Any questions?
Richard, yourself.
Yeah, Richard, thanks for your question. So firstly, I would say we are only able to utilize our dollars within Lane County. And if that shelter, for example, were in Lane County, the other caveats of these dollars is that we're not able to supplant funds or braid dollars. And as a result, it means we're not able to kind of come in and provide funding in parallel to other dollars. And so I think it would have been difficult to be able to quote unquote save that shelter, though, we could have taken a closer look at it if that were a scenario in our community.
Thank you. Any further questions before we ask James to talk about encampments? Then I have one regarding the timing on getting the information out. Do you have a feeling for that?
We're hoping within the next week or two.
Okay. And it's in process right now?
Absolutely.
Very good. And one quick other question. I have a chance to see what's happening in other counties a little bit. How are we faring? Are we kind of in the pack on this, or are we a little bit ahead of people, or do you have a feeling for that?
So I actually think we're a little behind, to be honest. I am seeing agencies that have started serving folks. I think one of the reasons is that there are some communities that are kind of parsing out dollars kind of as the opportunities arise, and that's just not the approach that we were able to take.
Very good. Okay, thanks. James?
Or the mayor has a...
I'm sorry, Mayor Venus.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to comment that this really is a great thing. This is a lot of money coming to provide shelter services, and I'm understanding that there's that this will really support an expansion of some of our ongoing systems, and I'm very happy about it. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing the final list and appreciate your work in making it happen.
And I share your excitement in that. I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be spending the money and exactly how will we see it actually going to work inside our community. Thanks. Further questions? I see none. James?
They can't hear you.
Thank you. Then I will lean forward if I'm going to talk, but I'm going to sit back.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So encampment response, the National Alliance to End Homelessness and several other national entities that are working on homelessness have really been endorsing an encampment-focused outreach approach over the last couple of years. And so how it differs from how outreach has traditionally been operated is that it focuses one by one on encampments through a multidisciplinary response. So the key component is a street outreach team that's engaging with that encampment, and then they're partnering with a variety of entities, public health, law enforcement, behavioral health, whatever kind of needs are identified in the specific encampment they're working on, to try to connect those folks ultimately to shelter and housing. So the goal is to resolve an encampment, kind of one by one, rather than a kind of generic outreach approach where outreach teams are just going out and making contact with a variety of folks residing in a variety of different areas. So this slide shows the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness has really 7 core principles for addressing encampments. As I mentioned, establishing a cross-agency, multi-sector response. I'll get into a little bit more detail on that on the next slide. One of the really key components of encampment engagement is making sure that the residents of those encampments are the ones who are making the decisions around their own lives. So first step is really those outreach teams are engaging those encampment residents, finding out what it is they want, what their needs are, how can we connect them to resources that are going to be able to address those needs. Really comprehensive and coordinated outreach. So, utilizing street outreach teams as the folks that are doing the direct service work with the residents of the encampments, and then bringing in those other entities to help support that. Obviously, as always with street outreach, addressing basic needs. The providing of storage is really key. It's key for outreach, any outreach work that involves ongoing engagement and ongoing case management. If you're going to be working with an unsheltered person on ongoing case management, they may need to come into your office. They may need to go to the Social Security office or to DMV to get their ID. So they're going to need a place that they can store their belongings during the day while they're doing those things. So that's really key as well. Ensuring that there's access to shelter or housing options. The goal is to resolve an encampment by getting everyone into shelter or housing. So you need to make sure you have those resources paired with any encampment response. And then beyond shelter, those pathways to the permanent housing opportunities in a community. And then creation of a plan that will help of what will happen to encampment sites after closure. So in some communities, their encampment response is based off of encampments that law enforcement has identified need to be closed by a certain time. Not all communities are taking that approach. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we've been talking about for our community. But will the site, after it's been resolved, everyone has been connected to shelter or housing, will that site then be fenced off? Will that, what plans will be taken to keep a site from continuing to become an ongoing encampment? Carly, if you can go to the next slide, please. So we have a bi-weekly street outreach coordination meeting. I think as of now, we have about 12 different providers that attend that meeting. We spend a lot of time in those meetings just talking about specific clients that those teams are working with, but then we also talk about how to coordinate street outreach efforts across the county and really trying to avoid duplicating those efforts. So through those meetings, we've been talking about encampment response and how we want to see it play out in our community. And one of the key things was we needed to come up with a definition of what an encampment is. There is no national definition of an encampment. So in looking at some other communities that have done this, and in talking with our street outreach group, we talked with the league, we came up with a definition of a specific location or a general area. So sometimes encampments will move within a block radius, but they're in that general area that consists of 5 to 30 residents that are residing in tents, built structures, or vehicles, and then that site has existed for more than 30 days. So these are established sites that folks have been residing in for a period of time. This next definition talks a little bit more about what that multidisciplinary team should look like. So Org Code is an entity that does a lot of planning around homeless response. And so they have identified this list, and I won't go through each of them, but this list of folks that are the types of entities that really need to be at the table. And again, it's the street outreach teams that are going out and having that direct contact with those residents and identifying their needs, and then working with a coordinator who is overseeing building, if these relationships don't already exist, building these relationships with these entities that are named here. So there's a real collaborative approach to working to resolve these encampments. Questions at all about any of that?
Venice.
This sounds great, and I guess I'm wondering, is the city of Eugene, are our outreach folks part of this 12 provider network? So as we're responding to calls for service for specific encampments, that's folding into this conversation that you're having every.
Yeah, and to clarify a little bit, there will be an encampment-specific outreach team that is funded through All In. So as Kate mentioned, we are in the process of funding those. They will be the team that is focused on this response, but will then be working with all of the other outreach teams that exist. To more specifically answer your question, yes, currently Whitebird Nest, who is contracted for Eugene Outreach, attends those, HIV Alliance, who does outreach in Eugene and in Springfield. And so, yeah, all the primary providers of street outreach in our community have been a part of the collaboration and coordination meetings on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Mayor Venice. A question from Commissioner Fleck, and then we'll go to the chat.
Do we have any rural outreach going on at the moment?
Currently we do. We have, Lane County has a team of Lane County employees that do rural outreach between, in the west parts of the county, so between Eugene and Florence, in Veneta, and in the wooded areas in between. HIV Alliance has a current contract to cover the other balance of the county, so South County, East County, and then part of All In, there is funding that is specific for rural focused. Yeah, the goal really is to have full geographic coverage of Lane County through street outreach and to ensure that it's not being duplicated in an area so we can maximize that. I see Richard's questions. I don't know if there were other questions.
Very good. Then how well can outreach work when there's constant forced movement and groups? I'm not sure how equipped you are to handle that other than
I mean, I think the short answer would be that this is going to be a trial run for us to do encampment-specific focused street outreach, and I think it'll involve working with law enforcement partners when encampments are identified and seeing if that is an encampment where there is an opportunity to, if there has not been a law enforcement action already put in place, a notification that that encampment needs to leave. Can we work with law enforcement to identify a timeline? Can we work potentially to get sanitation set up, address the things that may have led to that encampment getting on the radar of law enforcement as needing to be closed. So I think it's a great question, Richard, and I think it's one that we need to continue to work through as we identify the encampments we're going to work with and what jurisdiction they fall under.
Excellent. We're starting to get a little bit behind on our agenda today, but this has been an interesting topic. And I think we can rest assured that this will return to the agenda until January 10th, 2024, which is the deadline for the spending of all the money, and making sure that we get updates on who is spending the money, how they're spending the money, and the results in the community. James, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the participation in that. We'll move down the agenda. We're a little bit behind, but I think we're not dreadfully lacking. Next is we'll have a presentation on the emergency housing voucher EHV equity report, and Daniel Batista and Beth Oakes. Danielle from Lane County and Beth from Homes for Good will come to the table, and you already have. You have the floor.
Thank you, everyone.
And a reminder, please, everyone, if you're asking questions, lean into the mic a little bit so that folks online can hear.
Thank you for having us this afternoon. And before we begin, I'd also like to introduce Nat Dybens from Homes for Good, and she will also be presenting part of our presentation today. So thank you.
Great, yes. So thank you for allowing us to present. So we're going to present, we have the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, and Homes for Good in Lane County participated in a cohort, and we wanted to share some of our learnings and findings. And I just say that it's been a great partnership with Homes for Good, and also just being able to have dedicated time to focus on equity and looking specifically through a racial equity lens. And then we also have Cami Freitag, who participated in this. She's not going to present today, but was a key person in this, as well as other partners within our organizations who were involved. Next slide, please. So our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of racial equity, kind of a definition for a framework. We're not experts in equity, but we'll share what we used in helping us move the work forward, and then kind of the role of the continuum of care and the public housing agencies. And then we'll talk about the communities of practice cohort specifically, a little bit about the emergency housing voucher. This group has been, we brought it to this group over almost 2 years ago now, so a little refresher on that. And then look at some of our Lane County community data and early findings, and then last but not least, our action plan moving forward. Next slide.
Thank you. Greetings all. So to review how we're defining racial equity, that is getting defined as a system in which racial identity is not a factor in or predictor of one's opportunities of or socioeconomic outcomes. I also want to highlight the considerations between intention versus impact. So we are acknowledging that racial inequities does not require naming individual people or programs as racist or intentionally discriminatory, as well as historical systemic racism and discrimination and unconscious bias all contribute to racially inequitable impact and outcomes, and policies and practices that appear to be, and even were intended to be race neutral, may still contribute to or result in racial inequities. Next slide, please. Thank you. We found that this was a very impactful infographic from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. In every state, African Americans are more likely than white Americans to experience homelessness. One of the gray boxes on the left indicates Oregon, and our rate in Oregon is 3 times more likely. So why should this matter to us? It's a great question. So as highlighted in the previous slide, this is not an isolated situation and condition for our area. Race and ethnicity are predictive of many socioeconomic outcomes. And so what this does is provide us important opportunities for us all to ensure that our systems are not contributing to those inequities and work towards reducing those kinds of inequities in our systems. So being intentional with data collection and analysis can reveal many more opportunities for improvement. So our goals and objectives for this cohort, advancing equity through EHVs, included engaging in peer-to-peer learning environments, and that is both with our local COC and PHA as well as others, improving partnerships, examining the racist structures and policies that contribute to maintain and exacerbate housing inequality, utilizing data to better understand equity-related strengths, challenges, and opportunities, and to create an action plan to improve equity within our systems through group collaboration and resource sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. So this is who participated in this current cohort. So we were one of 5 communities, sorry. And we just had our last presentation yesterday on our action plan. So we're excited to share with you today. Next slide. This was just Nat talked about the objectives, but some of the learning sessions that we went through. So we went through our own data. We talked about root causes of and disparities of homelessness, and then even looked at some Oregon information, which is pretty eye-opening, and then talking about how to center Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our programming and in our policymaking, and then our community plan. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So what are emergency housing vouchers? So emergency housing vouchers were made available through the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021. And so HUD provided more than 70,000 vouchers nationwide. And this was for people who were experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And then together, Homes for Good and Lane County worked together, and Homes for Good was allocated 184 vouchers. And all of these must go through the coordinated entry system for referrals. And so you might have recalled that we came to you all to approve our prioritization. And so for context, we ended up prioritizing people first who were recently homeless or in a rapid rehousing program, and then that allows us to free up some more rapid rehousing slots for people who are homeless, and then people who are meeting the domestic violence or sexual assault criteria, and then people who are at risk of homelessness. And then the last prioritization we had were people who are actually literally homeless, meeting that HUD definition. And the reason for that is because this does not have any ongoing case management or housing navigation resources attached to it. So and then we can actually go on to 2 more slides down. 1 more. Perfect, thank you. Here's a little information about the demographics. So we have 3 different kind of comparisons. The first one is the Lane County census below the federal poverty line. The second group is the homeless by name list, and the last one is actually people who were referred to EHV from the coordinated entry system. So the first bucket looks at, Lane County demographic, a little over 80% of our population reports as white alone, non-Hispanic, non-Latino, Latinx. And then the second is Hispanic, Latino at 9% roughly, and then multi-race at around 6%. And then our homeless by name list looks fairly similar, although it's a little lower on the white alone and a little higher on the multi-race. And then EHV, even lower on the white alone, and then higher on multi-race and higher on unknown. And then the reason why we wanted to show you all 3 is because, again, the referral source included some people who were on the homeless by name list were experiencing homelessness, but a lot of the people that were referred were actually housed but at risk of homelessness. So for a lot of the analysis, you'll see it's going to be comparing to that first group of the Lane County census and federally below federal poverty line. Next slide. So I want to share some limitations to this analysis. So the first one is that we were limited to looking at the head of the household. So we know that the makeup, we didn't look at the whole makeup of the household, but just the head of household. The other thing is that this started in 2021, and so we're almost fully utilized all of the vouchers of the 184. So that doesn't leave us a lot of opportunity to actually make a lot of program changes, but we did learn a lot, and there are still some opportunities there. The other missed opportunity is that we lack the demographic information on who actually applied. So because our coordinated entry system at the time was not set up to kind of to refer people who are also at risk of homelessness and may not have only been literally homeless, we had set up a cognito form and we didn't collect all the demographic information there. So unfortunately, we don't know who, the demographic information of who applied and then who actually was referred. And then the other piece is that it's a pretty small data set for some groups. So we chose to initially focus on comparing white alone, non-Hispanic, and BIPOC populations. But just a note that we recognize that BIPOC, there are multiple groups within that, and we need to continue to analyze it. But for this presentation, we looked at those two groups, so you'll see that. Next slide. All right, so this is our first analysis. So what you're looking at here is who was actually referred from the coordinated entry system to EHV. And although 23.3% of Lane County residents below the federal poverty line are BIPOC, over 30% of EHV referrals were those who identify as BIPOC. So we're actually seeing a little bit more overrepresentation in referrals for that population. Next slide.
Thank you, Danielle. So as we move from the coordinated entry system, the referrals then arrive at Homes for Good, and we start data collection on those as they arrive. And in doing this analysis, what we found is that the success rate for accessing the voucher, which is essentially the paperwork part of the process to obtain the voucher, is that 80% of clients who identified as white, non-Hispanic, were issued vouchers, while over less than half of clients who identified as BIPOC were issued vouchers. And so that disparity was then the stepping stone to lead us into digging into deeper data as to the reasons why. So next slide, please. So as we begin to look at the reasons for denial, it's predominantly paperwork. And it's interesting in the sense of paperwork broken down into a couple of different areas. So for our process, we do a lot of data collection and assigning data points and sets to steps in the process. So we know if someone didn't complete the paperwork process because the mail was returned as undeliverable. We know if folks didn't complete the process because they didn't turn in the full application packet. We know folks that completed part of the application packet but didn't supply additional requests for missing documentation. And what our analysis showed us is that predominantly the mail issues and the paperwork result in families that identify as BIPOC and not being able to obtain that voucher. So that really drove, and we can discuss it in a later slide, but this analysis definitely impacts our action plan going forward for the utilization of vouchers and our processes and connecting with folks in the community to navigate the housing process for those voucher services. Next slide, please. So as we work our way through that paperwork process and we said, well, how long does it take folks to get through that? We were also finding that there's lengths of time, average of 213 days to complete that full paperwork process, which is also a large area for improvement within this function of obtaining housing. So that area is also impacting our plan of action too as going forward. We saw that on average, the white alone non-Hispanics took an average of 213 days to fully complete that process. And for families that identified as BIPOC, it was an average of 189 days. So, and essentially this is all paperwork. This is not any housing search yet. It is
It is the process to get the voucher in hand to begin that housing search. And then once the voucher is in hand, we also saw a substantial amount of times to obtain the housing for the emergency housing vouchers. We saw closer time frames between both groups for actually obtaining the housing, 127 for white alone and 130 days for BIPOC families. So once the voucher is in hand, the ability to actually obtain housing is similar, but still both processes are a substantial amount of time. It's also worth noting that the initial search time for those vouchers is 120 days, but we received multiple requests from EHV voucher holders for extensions on time, which our policies allow us to provide those, and those can be anything that's outside the family's control, such as issues of homelessness, domestic violence, illness, an array of different items. But these two drove our action plan for next steps as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it back over to Nat for service fees.
Thank you. So one of the unique aspects about the emergency housing vouchers was that the vouchers had service fees available for use, which is unlike our other housing vouchers. Everyone with an active voucher had access to use service fees. However, as we dig into the data on utilization, we did notice a significant disparity between their use across demographics. So on the left side here, utilizing service fees, 75% of white households as compared to 55% of BIPOC and Latinx households use service fees overall. Additionally, on the right side of our graph, of the available uses for service fees, and I also want to mention too that, of the available uses for service fees, the deposit is generally the biggest one-time cost that we did see as being utilized. And as we know, deposits are usually required and are costly and often a barrier for moving in. But we saw that on the data, 59% of white clients use fees, of white households use fees to pay for security deposits versus 36% of BIPOC and Latinx households. And each household with an active voucher had service fees available with a maximum of $2,000 allowance. So what was also very insightful looking at the data here was that the average utilization for white households was just over $1,500 as compared to the Latinx and BIPOC households who averaged just above $1,300 out of that available $2,000. So our action plan that we developed collaboratively together based on our findings and also of the cohort in general includes focusing on reducing denials due to paperwork issues. And we see that there's a great potential here for more outreach and to brainstorm with other partners and culturally specific organizations on engagement for completing that application process. Also, we want to evaluate the use of service fees to increase utilization and voucher success. This includes increasing the utilization in general and amount in general. And we also intend to reassess the plan for our service fees. We currently have about $300,000 available. We also want to evaluate housing stability outcomes as the program progresses. As mentioned, this is a new voucher program, so the data is very fresh and we don't have, we want to give a little bit more time so that we can look at average length of stay by demographics, as well as reasons for potential exits.
Thank you.
Can we go back? Thank you. I believe Danielle is going to pick up.
Yeah. We also want to look at increasing partnerships with culturally specific organizations, not just on the reducing paperwork issues, but overall in the programming and then for future programs. And then we also need to be more intentional with data collection and evaluation with any future program. Like I mentioned before, we had that missed opportunity of not having it at the application, so we don't have that data. But also just understanding that there are different pieces and process milestones along the way to get to your outcomes that we want to be looking at. And then we'd also like to look into more language and literacy needs of our community and making sure that all of the materials and the programs that we're doing are meeting that. And then the last thing is really emphasizing, a lot of we presented today was we didn't have any focus groups or qualitative data to share with you, but we'd like to do more of that in the future from different providers, culturally specific organizations, and people with lived experience.
And I would add, and I would add as well, we had previously discussed that our community was issued 184 EHV vouchers. We currently have 178 in use right now. So that's also going to impact sort of the implementation plan we want to take effect, and then trying to collect data out of that will have challenges if we're not having substantial turnover of the vouchers to be able to do data collection moving forward specific to these vouchers. We also have a check-in with our cohort in 6 months to come back as a collective and discuss the process of the action plan and to provide some updates on that as well. So our partnership will continue, and then we'll be looping back with those other groups that Danielle had mentioned earlier in the presentation and see which each community's been able to achieve in implementing their action plan.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. A good presentation. We have room for a few questions right now. We are a little bit behind on our agenda. I'd like to get to every item on today's agenda. So if you have questions, hands raised. Rich Self had a question online regarding does the service fee include the application fee?
Yes, the service fee is limited to $2,000 per family, but it can be at the family's discretion as to what it's used for. So it can be security deposits, application fees, utility hookups, essential household items, and the data analysis showed that many folks, the vast majority, use those funds for security deposits.
Excellent. I think we have time for 2 questions. Let's go with Mayor Vinnis. Did you have your hand raised?
I think Maggie was ahead of me.
And then, okay, then Maggie.
Just kind of an insight. I used to be a caseworker, and I noticed that many of the unhoused people that I worked with were overwhelmed with the paperwork and were more successful if I or another advocate could sit down with them and complete. I think that's a huge barrier, and with more help, people will be more successful.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Maggie, and I see everybody nodding in agreement.
Yes.
Very good. Mayor Vinnis?
And I guess that's sort of related to my question, because you noted in the completing the paperwork that it was 213 days for the white and non-Latino, and then it was 165 days or something for, so the BIPOC community members actually were able to do this faster. So was that because they had assistance?
It was no intentional case management or support for the EHV vouchers. So those processes were done independently unless the applicant happened to have obtained an advocate through some other resource outside of Homes for Good or the COC.
So you don't have any insights on why they were able to do it faster?
I don't. I consider both buckets lengthy.
Too long.
Yeah, yes.
I think one thing to highlight too is the difference between how many people who were white head of households were referred. We had a much greater data set there, and so there's also greater potential for a higher variance.
Yes.
Great.
In the average.
Well, thank you for the presentation. We'll invite you back as things move forward, but at this point, I'm going to change the agenda around just a little bit and ask Catherine Rohan to step to the table. And for the presentation, which is item 10 on our agenda, Eugene Moves feedback. That'll be followed by shelter housing inventory tableau and committee updates. So, Ms. Rohan, thank you, and thank you for helping us change the agenda.
Yeah, thank you. Well, while Carly's pulling that up, I'll go ahead and start. So good afternoon again. My name is Catherine Rohan. I'm a transportation planner with the City of Eugene. Now, when I tell people I'm a transportation planner, the first thing they always ask me is like, what's up with the buses? I have to tell people that's what the good folks over at Lane Transit District do, not me. I work with them. I love them. But I work more on walking, biking, safety, infrastructure projects, so things we can build in the City of Eugene. And I'm here today, perfect, thank you, Carly, to tell you a bit about Move Huge, short for Eugene, which is what we're calling this work effort. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions and feedback, but I know everyone wants to wrap up by 1:30, so I'm happy to stay a little bit after the meeting if anyone wants to chat with me. I also want to note here, I was not familiar with the Lane County Poverty and Homelessness Board until a couple of months ago. But I took some time and looked at the structure of your board, your strategic plan, and I think the overlap in transportation planning and your work is really highlighted in your strategic goal 1.2, which is about improving safety of and accessibility to facilities that support people experiencing houselessness. And I bring this up to help frame the headspace that we can be in for the next few minutes during this presentation. Really, what can we build to make it safer, easier for people experiencing poverty and houselessness to access their day-to-day needs? So whether that's getting to a shelter, a medical appointment, job training, we all want reliable, safe, and dignified transportation. Next slide, please. Okay. So to start, late last year, Eugene area voters approved the 2025 to 2029 street bond. That bond provides about $61 million for repaving streets for vehicles. But some of that money, next slide, please. Okay.
That photo is right outside the window here.
Yep. Okay, but some of that money is also for awesome things we do on our streets aside from driving. So the bond includes, and if you can just page through the next 3 slides real quick, that'd be great. So $5 million for walking projects, $3 million for biking projects, $3 million for safety projects, as well as $2 million for street tree projects. So the transportation planning team is tasked, and I'm one of those planners, with developing a list of projects for those walking, biking, and safety funds. Parks and Open Space is working on a list of projects for the street tree funds. But just a note here that this is a really big investment in walking, biking, and safety projects. Past street bonds have not been structured in the same way. So as a city, we're really trying something new here. Next slide, please. So that street bond kicks in 2025, which sounds like a long way off, but the planning and scheduling of all these walking, biking, safety projects really starts now. And the biggest question is, how do we spend these funds? So myself, other folks in the transportation planning team have been out in the community tabling, attending events, to hear what people want us to build to make it easier and safer to get around Eugene. And now I want to note here that we are firmly into June, and I'm only just now talking to this group. So while we have wrapped up a lot of our general public engagement, there's still some select groups, such as this board, that we're soliciting input from. And I also want to apologize for not connecting with this group earlier. Citywide engagement has not been an easy task. Next slide, please. So to figure out how we should spend this money, the transportation planning team has been asking 2 main questions. Next 2 slides, if you would. 1, what areas feel unsafe or uncomfortable when walking, biking, or driving? And then 2, what new walking, biking, and safety project ideas do people have? Because these are the people that are out there day to day. We have a small team. I don't see every corner of the city. I need to hear from you how you get around, how the little boy next door to you gets to school, where your children and grandchildren go, and where they struggle to cross the street or feel unsafe. Next slide, please. And to gather answers to those questions, we have an online map. It's pictured here. I've shared a link with Katie. Hopefully, we're able to get that out to all of you as well. But this map is pretty handy. You can go in, drop a pin, leave a comment, tell us where you'd like to see improvements or where you feel unsafe. It could be personal things, things you have heard from other people. But it's super cool because you can also go in and see the pins that other people have left and be like, oh, I agree with that, or let's also add this. But because we have wrapped up our general public engagement, this map is no longer live on the Move Huge Engage Eugene page. It is live via the link that will be shared with all of you. And what I'll ask is that we make additions to this map over the next 8 days, so that's by next Friday. You're, of course, welcome to email me as well with ideas and concerns. I know not everyone is a fan of online mapping. And then next slide, please. So what's next? Next 3 slides, please. So now through August, we're working on sorting, cleaning, and prioritizing all of the comments and project ideas we've collected. There are a lot. Prioritization is based on criteria that aligns with our city goals, such as increasing safety, increasing the number of trips made by walking, biking, transit, and focusing on equity. August through September, we'll be sharing and refining that project list. And then in October, if everything goes according to plan, cross your fingers, we'll present the list of projects to City Council for their approval. And hopefully, we'll start getting those walking, biking, and safety projects built starting in 2025. Last slide, please. Oh, it's already up. All right, so that was my very quick overview. And if we have time now, I'm happy to answer questions and take both general and specific input on transportation. We have to keep it to the city of Eugene. Sorry, I know some of you guys are from outside Eugene. And if you don't have any input right now, that's A-okay. My contact information is up there. I have some business cards I can leave. But I believe that's all I have. And hopefully we're a little bit caught up on the agenda now.
Well, thank you for rushing through that. 1, 2, 3, next 9 slides, please. I like that. Any questions? A great presentation, a lot contained in that. And if we take a photograph of those little squares up there, will that get us someplace?
That'll take you to both the Engage Eugene page, which includes the next steps for Move Huge, as well as the city page where you can find more information about the street bond.
And what are those little squares called?
So those are called QR codes.
QR codes.
Yep, you'll just use your smartphone's camera app.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
And Susan Lopez?
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I just, really quickly, my daughter did actually put together a petition requesting street improvements down Grove Street. She's a middle schooler at Kelly. It's her first year, and she was protesting because I won't let her walk or ride her bike because I didn't think it was safe. So I don't know if you guys got a copy of her petition with all the signatures, but we did turn it into Lane County Public Works.
I am familiar with Grove Street and the struggles out there with the county facilities. So we work closely with Lane County, especially in River Road and Santa Clara, where the roads are often owned by Lane County, but we recognize that there's a lot of walking, biking needs, especially with all the schools that are up there. So thank you.
Yep. Yep.
The urban transition, as I call it, is definitely a challenge. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan, for that question. So we'll move down the agenda and we'll go right into shelter and housing inventory tableau report. And Carly's going to give us that report. And Carly, we are a little pushed for time, so I would like to get to committee updates, but
Yes.
with that.
You're going to get mostly my commentary and less about the numbers themselves, if that's okay with everybody. And then we can, I'm happy to answer questions some other time. But I did want to give an update on both the point-in-time count and the housing inventory count. We do both at the same time. So the night of January 25th, I think folks are really familiar with the point-in-time count. We do a portion for who's unsheltered, and that's the main part I want to talk about. We also do a part for who's sheltered. That's easy. I just pull a report from HMIS, and because everyone does their data entry on time, it's very simple. Actually, we do it a little bit later, but for that exact reason. We pull it straight from HMIS, no problem. And then we also pull our inventory at the same time and submit those all to HUD and say on the same day, here's what was available, here's who was sheltered, and then we also do an estimate of who was unsheltered. So I wanted to just give an update on that 4-month process and what was turned in. There will be something public on the website, and it just is, we just have a lot going on right now. So I just wanted to put some of that out there. The main thing I wanted to talk about was the survey that we did, because in the past, before I was here, we sent volunteers out all across the county, which was kind of silly because we have HMIS that's a pretty good count, just not a perfect count. So I wanted to share how in the past couple of years we've pulled an HMIS count and then tried to do targeted surveys using outreach workers. This year we found quite a few people. 35 people did not want to be surveyed, that's fine. 61 we had already counted. And then 77 we got to add to the count, but we had actually seen them pretty recently, just not within the window that HUD requires. And 86 we had not seen at all. So I do hear sometimes that there are people we aren't counting. Yes, there are people we aren't counting. There's people who don't want to be counted. And there's also people who are harder to find. And so to me, we did find some of these people. This represented about 8% of our count, but 92% of our count came from HMIS, which I think is amazing. So it seems like the strategy we're using is working. These numbers you'll get, and so you can sit with over time, but I have the count we got from HMIS versus the survey. And those areas with an asterisk, more than 10% of their count came from a survey. So we were right to survey those areas, and we need to continue to survey those areas. Springfield, we got one person, right? So maybe that's not the best place to target outreach next year, but we really need to keep up with Cottage Grove and Florence and Oak Ridge and those rural areas, which it's really good that we did. Because, you know, Florence doubled their count. So really important to send folks there where we just don't have as many services. If Mike doesn't see them in Cottage Grove, they might not be counted, and so it's good that we went there. As a total, we had just over 2,800 folks, whether that was sheltered or unsheltered. And compared to last year, we had almost exactly the same number of people. This is very deceptive because last year Egan was open. And so our shelter numbers look really similar, but actually we've added a lot of shelter beds that are permanent beds, when last year we had a lot of people using Egan for the night. So these look similar, but actually there's some pretty significant changes. We also send some reports in on special populations, and rather than giving you all of the numbers, just wanted to reflect this column on the right side, how much different was the percentage of everyone we saw who fell into this special population, and how different was that from last year. So this year we found, or there were more, youth and domestic violence survivors, and the numbers of some of these other populations did go down a bit compared to last year. They're still quite high, so just in comparison, especially since we had quite similar numbers, you know, the percentages are interesting.
Can I just?
Yes, yeah.
Those, the chronically homeless, 1170, and the mental health condition, 1114, those are mutually exclusive? Or would that double count? Someone's chronically homeless and has mental health?
They could be both.
They could be
yes.
both.
And to be chronically homeless, you must have a disabling condition. Mental health is one of those.
So that's not exactly additive.
No. Yeah, we have a lot of overlap actually between a lot of these groups. You can imagine too, between veterans and some of these other groups, we have quite a bit of overlap. So yes, the first column will not add to 28, 24. Happy to answer questions about that another time. There's so much more I could have put in here, but I was trying to be selective. Same thing for the housing inventory count. Compared to last year, this column in bold will show you our utilization rate this year. And we talked about rapid rehousing a few minutes ago. We always report 100%. That is how it's supposed to be, which feels a little bit weird. But our emergency shelter utilization rate was up. Our transitional housing rate was down. Our permanent supportive housing rate was up, and it's so good. That's quite high. Here's the number of beds compared to last year. And for rapid rehousing, because like we talked about, the number of people in families is going to fluctuate, I put in italics the number of households we were able to serve. So in every type of project this year, we were able to expand our capacity. Still, we're left with 2,100 people unsheltered, which is very similar to last year. So while some numbers are up, some are down, we still have quite a few folks who are in need of assistance. And I did take Egan out of this count because it just wasn't fair to compare across years. All of that is great, but what I really wanted to show And I'll make sure this link is out to people. But if people are familiar with our Tableau dashboards, I think I'm going to have to stop sharing and reshare to make this happen. But we have a new one out for shelter and permanent supportive housing and all of our really housing projects. And wanted to let folks know this is available. I'll put it in the chat because it's taking a moment to load. But this will show, can I zoom out just a little bit? The number of, for every single month, here at the top, you can pick your date range. You can do a calendar year, you can pick a month. We publish this the week after the month closes, essentially. How many beds were available for that project type on every day of that month. And then if you scroll down, you can see for each project how full they were for those dates. If you click on the bar, this is running just like a little bit slowly, but it should update that count also at the top of the page for you.
And this is on the Lane County website.
Yes.
An intuitive link to on the Lane County website. And I apologize for rushing you forward, but we have just a few moments for.
Yes. One thing I wanted to say is very cool we've never done before. Up here, you can also see that inventory by agency. So just wanted to flag that as an option. I know folks are going to be really curious about that part, so we'll make sure that the link gets out to you.
And so we can all click onto that right now if we had such means
I know.
here.
Everyone at home is distracted now.
I love it. Okay, thank you very much, Carly, and thank you for rushing through, packing so much information. I apologize, no questions. We're going to move directly on to committee updates. Catherine Ryan has stepped off, but the CE Stakeholder Committee is moving on. Dr. Foster, do you have an update on healthcare?
Yes, we're slowly moving ahead on medical respite, having more places for people with medical issues to recuperate. It's been a slow process. Part of the thing is we want a 5-year commitment of funding. We just don't want to, hire people, start a program for 1 year and then don't have funding. So we're slowly trying to look for funding for 5 years, and that's a process. But it's moving ahead slowly.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. I'll say that as I drove through the town of Gloucester in Cheshire last year, I thought about you. Dr. Foster went to Gloucester.
Thank you.
No Chamber of Commerce report. League, Julie Lambert.
All right, give me just a second here. I'm Julie Lambert, and I'm League Chair. And at League, we are continuing to work on increasing public awareness around the experience of homelessness. These steps include leveraging social media platforms, including public visibility of League's activities. I'm going to make this a little shorter than I planned. We are also working on a public education program explaining the diversity of reasons behind homelessness and the connections to affordable housing shortage, being priced out of the rental market, and having to choose between electricity and paying food, etc. Work is also ongoing on a local homelessness bill of rights, and we are watching New York City very closely to see how theirs evolves. We're also advocating for the creation of a map of allowed places to exist, and we are following other communities who have managed it successfully. They did not find it impossible to create and implement this objectively reasonable and valuable tool for those seeking safety while incorporating the spirit of HB 3115, which is to help all parties. So we seek to redress this imbalance wherein only the authorities have this crucial information rather than those who would survive by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And Susan Lopez on Youth Homeless Solutions. We just have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I don't really have any updates right now.
Thank you, Susan, for being here. And Matthias.
We're just working on a game plan for the next 6 months, and we've been talking about a youth VI SPDAT and assessment in the summer when there might be more youth outside instead of hunkering down away from the cold.
Right on. Thank you for the ongoing work. Then we'll move directly into closure. We have our next meeting is,
Yeah, so we're going to plan on canceling the regularly scheduled August meeting and instead hold another all-member meeting in July on the 20th. And so just note your calendar, another one of these meetings with the full group on July 20th, and then the August meeting will be canceled. One thing to know is the path to the continuum of care application has begun. And so likely there will need to be kind of an emergency or special meeting related to the continuum of care application in late August. And so that's another reason why canceling the regularly scheduled meeting made sense. It will also allow me to go on vacation. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for bringing us through a very robust and a very well-organized agenda today. Without further items for today's, the order of today's agenda, we are adjourned. Thank you.